When you're hunting for a tiny precision mill, the first thing that pops into most people's heads is I can probably find something cheaper online and still get the job done. I've seen a lot of hobbyists splurge on a bargain that turns out to be a handful of plastic gears and a wobbling spindle, and then wonder why the pieces they're trying to carve never line up the way they should. That regret can bite hard, especially when you're working on a model airplane wing rib or a jewelry component where a fraction of a millimeter matters. So the question I kept asking myself was, does the Proxxon 34108 Micro Mill FF230 actually feel like the smarter buy, or is it just another overpriced piece of kit? Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First off, the micromill market is a niche that sits between full-size CNC routers and handheld rotary tools. You're not looking for a machine that will gouge a block of aluminum in seconds. You're after something that can hold a piece of brass or acrylic steady while you feed it inch by inch, tweaking the depth with a handwheel. That's why the handwheel on the Proxxon is such a focal point. It doubles as the height adjuster and the fine feed control. In practice, that means you can set a rough 8, lock it, and then keep turning the wheel for those ultrafine steps of 0.02 mm when you're finishing a dovetail slot in a model train chassis. I tested the mill on a few typical projects: a set of tiny gears for a clock kit, a series of engraved patterns on a thin aluminum sheet, and a few hobby-scale wooden dowels for a model ship. What struck me was the consistency of the feed. Because the wheel is directly connected to the spindle's drivetrain, each rotation translates into a predictable movement, which is something you can't always count on with cheap alternatives that rely on loose belts or stepper motors. The result is a clean cut on the brass gear blank without the chatter that often ruins the tooth profile on cheaper rigs. Now, the strengths of this machine are very much tied to that design. The precision feed makes it easy for anyone who's comfortable with a bit of manual control to achieve tolerances that would otherwise demand a digital controller. The compact footprint, about the size of a small desktop printer, means you can tuck it into a garage bench or a hobby corner without sacrificing too much space. And because it's built in Germany, the tolerances on the moving parts feel tighter than the average imported mini-mill you might find on a discount site. But there are trade-offs you need to be aware of before you click Add to Cart. The spindle runs at a maximum of 230 revolutions per minute, which is plenty for plastics, wood, and soft metals, but it will struggle if you try to cut harder alloys or need a faster surface finish on steel. I found myself having to adjust the feed rate manually, slowing down whenever the material showed any sign of resistance. Also, the mill doesn't come with an integrated dust extraction system, so you'll either need to set it up near a shop vac or be prepared for a little mess when you're cutting materials that generate fine chips. That's a hidden cost for some, especially if your workspace is already tight. Who should consider buying the Proxxon 34108? If you're a hobbyist who already knows how to hold a workpiece steady, or if you've spent time with a benchtop drill press and want to step into the world of light milling, this machine fits nicely. Model engineers, miniature sculptors, and anyone making small batches of custom hardware will appreciate the fine feed wheel and the ability to switch between a few different collets without retooling the whole setup. It's also a decent entry point for educators who need a safe, low-speed mill for teaching basic machining concepts to students. On the flip side, if you're looking for a turnkey CNC solution that can run unattended, or if your primary material is hardened steel, you'll probably be better off looking elsewhere. The manual feed means you have to be present for the entire cut, and the limited spindle speed caps the range of materials you can work with efficiently. For people who expect a plug-and-play experience with software integration, the Proxxon feels more like a precision hand tool than a digital workstation. A practical weakness that showed up during my testing was the way the base plates onto the benchtop. The mounting holes are spaced for a standard 2-inch bench, and while that's fine if you already have a compatible surface, you'll need to drill or use a mounting plate if your workbench is non-standard. That extra step can be a hassle for the first-time user. Additionally, the spindle motor is relatively quiet, but it does produce a faint hum that becomes noticeable after prolonged use, especially if you're in a small room. It's not a deal-breaker, but it's something to keep in mind if you're sensitive to background noise. On